While Breath of the Wild's main goal was, as the Zelda team kept saying, to break away from traditional Zelda conventions and pave a new path for the series, I felt that this meant it was sorely lacking some game mechanics, not just ones that were traditionally Zelda, but ones that would make it a better game. But before you decide to have a go at me, if you don't know me on my channel, I love this game, but I don't think it's above criticism, or I don't think it's so good that there's nothing I'd add to make it better. So today I'm going to go through my top 5 game mechanics I wish were in Breath of the Wild.
Number 5.
Changing the weather. Alright, if you've watched my Breath of the Wild review from last year, you'll know one of my biggest gripes with the game is stormy weather. It never rains in Breath of the Wild, it f***ing pours. Which makes every single surface slippery, meaning Link climbs as well as a spider in a bathtub. I mean, I know the point in the rain making things difficult to climb is that you either find shelter and camp out until the weather's better, or simply find a new way to get to where you want to go, but damn, it's so annoying having one of the game's best mechanics disabled every time the skies darken a little. The weather plays a really important part in the game. When it's stormy, for example, you need to remove your metallic items or else you'll be struck by lightning. I get it, it's cool, but after 100 hours in Hyrule, it just gets tedious. If there was a way to change the weather later on in the game, like the Sun Song, or Song of Storms from Ocarina of Time, it would make the game far less of a pain in certain parts. Need to climb a cliff but it's tipping it down with rain? Switch the weather to sunny. Fancy taking out an enemy in style? Switch the weather to a thunderstorm, then throw your sword at an enemy last minute to fry them with lightning. I know that this would detract from the whole survival feel of the game since you're supposed to adapt to whatever the world throws at you, including weather, but I think at least as a late game mechanic, weather changing would have been a brilliant and much appreciated option.
Number 4.
A post-game. So I guess you could argue that this one's not as much a game mechanic and more just wanting more of the game, but hey, it's my video, you're wrong. It was so satisfying to finally defeat the Great Calamity Ganon after hours of building up to the battle, taking on 4 corrupted colossal divine beasts, proving your worth in countless shrine trials, and then taking on Hyrule Castle and eventually making Ganon your bitch with the light arrows. You've finally saved Hyrule from a century of ruin and can now start to rebuild with Zelda. Except, you can't. That's it. The game ends with this cutscene and runs you back to just before you fought Calamity Ganon. I don't think a new storyline would be appropriate after the game's finished, but it just feels like such a waste to spend hours building up to this final battle, only to never see what happens after. Imagine if the world was explorable afterwards, with Hyrule Castle freed from malice, and the NPCs around the map thankful for your courage in defeating the Calamity. It wouldn't have to be much, but it'd be a nice reward to be able to walk around a Hyrule that you yourself have rid of evil.
Number 3.
Swimming underwater. I won't spend too long on this as I went over it in detail in my Zelda items that should have been in Breath of the Wild video, but I was so disappointed that you couldn't swim underwater in Breath of the Wild. Chances are this was actually planned at some point during development, as there were divine beasts planned based on a manta ray and a whale, based on this concept art, which likely you'd have had to swim down to reach. This would have been awesome, partially because of how terrifying deep water is to me, probably thanks to like this from games from my childhood.
Number 2.
Smithing. While actually smithing weapons from ores isn't really Zelda, and defeats the point of beating enemies and using their own weapons against them, I think that a mechanic that lets you repair weaponry at a blacksmith's in a town would be incredibly useful. Breath of the Wild's weapons are so brittle, it's like you're fighting bokoblins with glass. Durability is an important game mechanic because it forces you to use different weapon types maybe you're not used to, and prevents you from finding one really good weapon and holding onto it forever. But it does suck so hard to, say, slay your first Lionel and feel like a f***ing god with your massive weapon, only to have it break half an hour later. If weapons could be repaired, either using materials you mine or by paying a blacksmith, it'd give a little more weight to finding a good weapon in this game, since you know you could, if you wanted, keep it for a little while longer than normal by repairing it. Perhaps weak weapons like Boko clubs just require wood and a small amount of rupees to repair, while strong weapons like royal broadswords would take some more expensive resources and a large sum of money. It'd still mean players would kill enemies for weapons and their weapons would still break, because no one would have the time or resources to keep going to towns to repair their stuff. But it'd mean finding that ridiculously awesome weapon would actually mean something, because you could at least keep it for a decent amount of time.
Number 1.
Sailing. If you know me and how much I love the Wind Waker, this can't be a surprise to you. I wish we'd had a sailing mechanic in Breath of the Wild. No, not this weird leaf propulsion raft sailing, proper sailing with boats and, well, sails and shit. This sailing, not this sailing. The only real thing of worth in Breath of the Wild's southern sea is Eventide Island, but even if they'd just added a couple of smaller islands around, perhaps with shrines or mini-bosses on them, sailing would have been a brilliant addition. Lurelin Village is pretty underused in my opinion, the seaside town on the south of the map. Here maybe you could buy a boat and set off from the docks to explore the seas. Maybe it's just nostalgia speaking from Wind Waker, maybe you guys wouldn't want to see this as much as I would, but I just can't get the idea out of my head of taking on the seas in this game with a proper Breath of the Wild sailing theme playing. You know how the horse riding theme is the main Zelda overworld theme on piano? Imagine if when you're sailing in your boat, it plays a similar slow piano version of the Great Sea from the Wind Waker. Sailing would have been a really cool addition that would have added a little bit more to an area of the map that's a little underwhelming. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please leave a like, it really helps me out, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing for more. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.